If you're running a software development agency, it shouldn't be too hard to grow. Welcome to ManagedCoder Podcast. Tune in every week to find out how to grow your software development agency and help you to solve your day-to-day problems. With 20 plus years experience running an agency, please welcome your host, Shahed Islam.
Hey Ryan, welcome. I spoke with you last week, so we talked about a few topics and I thought I should welcome you on our podcast. Can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I am the founder and CEO of WhaleBoss. I'm also the host of the Scale Up Show. So I interview SaaS CEOs and they deconstruct their best strategies for growing their business and leveraging that. So I'm a podcast host and I'm the CEO of WhaleBoss, which is a sales consultancy company where I help tech startups grow their company specifically around pipeline, whether they're having a challenge with enough pipeline and or converting sales specifically for mid-market plus. So ideally companies that want to grow and multiply their largest and best customers. So I take the principles that I created and kind of found when I grew a business unit from 0 to 30 million in ARR in 5.5 years with really no marketing team or no SDRs. So that's a real quick background on me. I could go on in different details, but let's start there, man.
You have a lot of experience, and that's where I know I've been talking to a lot of agency owner, mostly software development agency. There are some people in India and other places, and one question they have it, they cannot build their pipeline, enough to run their business. And what I have identified that, sometimes they are not niching down enough, but also like the strategy they have it to reach out to people. So with your experience, if you have to give, talk about few points, what are the 3 advice you can give it to people who is listening to this podcast?
Yeah. And it's funny because it's like pipeline, no matter what business you are in, it's 9, I don't know, maybe not 9, maybe 8 times out of 10, the biggest challenge that companies are facing when it comes to growing revenue. And so there's 2 core buckets that I would kind of put this in terms of solving that problem. And one is basically most companies look at what's called their ICP or their ideal customer profile. That's whether it's the company's size, the persona, vertical, all those details, right? So the area that I look at that I think really, really helps, and this is especially relevant because of how fast things are changing, like you need to do this at least every 6 months, is also look at your perfect customer profile. So this is a strategy that I created as a rep. I did it in a go-to-market, and it doubled our deal size every year for 5 years, even 100x our largest deal size, while also speeding up our sales process. Snowflake leveraged it, as well as Vista Equity, which is a $90 billion fund that turns $2 billion companies into $6 billion companies in 3 years. And so a real quick breakdown on how you could leverage it in your business today is what I call the 5 by 5 by 5 method, right? 5 by 5 by 5. So what it is really is it's you take and look at the 5 largest deals that you've closed as an organization. You look at the top 5 fastest deals you've closed as an organization and the top 5 biggest losses that you've had. And what you really want to do is look at the demographics, like what verticals they're in, different titles that you've worked with, and really try and find weird outliers on why those big deals close, why they close so fast, and why you lost really big deals too. And just by doing that alone, what usually happens is what'll come to the top, and this especially works for horizontal solutions, like they can work across any vertical. You'll find that there's typically 2 or 3 verticals that have 70 to 80% of your revenue. And I see this all the time. I just saw this the other day. And essentially what happens with that is if you become a niche specialist with that and specifically target those, 70%, 80% type companies and become the expert in that space, you could charge a lot more. Your deals will continue to close faster. And then at the same time, you will lose a lot less business. So that's step number 1, right? Is really defining your perfect customer profile. Step number 2 is everybody is getting, because of the beautiful availability of automation and sequences and everything, everybody's getting hammered with cold email, cold, nondescript, generic email. So what's happening is the intensification of noise is massively accelerating. It's going through the roof, right? Because there's so many people that could send so many large amount of emails so fast and easy that people are just getting absolutely hammered, right? So I would advise if you're struggling with that, go in the exact opposite direction. Instead of sending 100 emails out a day or 2 days over a 2-day period over a sequence, send out like 15 to 20 just customized emails based on knowing really deep level of understanding of their business. You could take it off their website. You could take it off their LinkedIn profile. I would recommend doing that. You could also drop different examples of like voice to text, or I should say not voice to text, but voice direct messages on LinkedIn. You could do videos on LinkedIn, direct messages, and use an alternative channel like LinkedIn versus email, because they might get maybe 5 direct messages a day versus 500 emails a day, right? So those are a couple of really quick examples of like how I would target people and how I would kind of approach it.
So again, I think where I have seen the struggle with a lot of agencies, even I receive a lot of emails that, just like you said, customizing it, but not knowing that what problem I'm going through when they're reaching out. So the research part, how do they start? If a sales rep or a CEO or CEO is listening in, like what do they tell their team that start from here? Because a lot of people don't know how to do that research. Little bit more if you can provide us some information.
Yeah, so I would say there's a couple ways. First of all, like if you do step 1 and you research your own customers that you've had success with, it'll leave really good clues, right? And most people don't even take the time to do that. They set their ICP once and then they forget it, right? So I would do that. And then the other thing I would do is like, it's really simple. So I wrote a ChatGPT post on this on LinkedIn that went viral. But essentially, like, it's so simple and easy to execute on that. And here's the exact formula on how to do it, or even the prompt, right? Basically, jump into ChatGPT and ask like whoever you're selling to, ask what the 5 like top KPIs that role is evaluated on, right? So really simple. Even if it's the CEO of a small business, you could ask, hey, what are the top 5 KPIs that a CEO of a $5 million business in tech is most concerned about in a down economic environment? And you want to use that word for word, right? So look back, you want to be specific and give it context in terms of that. So what'll happen is it'll spit out the typical 5 key focus areas that a CEO in that space would try and, or I should say, have at that point in time. Then you do another prompt, which is very simple. It's like, hey, what are the 5 biggest challenges they have with meeting those needs, right? So you're taking it from like, okay, what are they focused on and what are their biggest challenges? Then the next step is, okay, if I were to provide agency services for creating, let's say, websites, how would I make my solution, and these are prompts, how would I make my solution relevant to someone that's experiencing the 5 challenges above, right? And then boom, that'll give you like a really, really solid foundation that you could work from. And then what you could even do is you could ask it to cut that up into 5 different emails addressing each problem individually in each email with your solution and how it helps. That's just one example, right? Another example of research that you could do is, I think, like, and I know I said look at your own existing customers, go back to your best customers and like literally sit down or have a quick call with them and just say, hey, what was the exact reason you chose us? Why did you buy us over everybody else? Who else did you look at? What other solutions did you consider? And then this will put you in the mind of the buyer. And then what you could do is basically replicate that in your messaging, in your outreach, in your connection with them, and use those exact words. And you'll be very, very successful if you leverage that formula.
No, this is really, really good. You are giving us the prompt and, from ChatGPT. And now my next question would be, since ChatGPT came in, like the first impression was I was talking to my sales rep and other people. Oh, now our sales email is going to be a lot easier. I can reply the email very quickly, which is good. They are doing it a lot faster. A lot of these proposals are sent very quickly. Does it really solve the problem? Like now, I am seeing a lot of other people are doing it. So we are back to square one, just like you said it. Like because of the new tools came through in last 4 or 5 years with drip campaign, I receive hundreds of email now. Same with ChatGPT. Just because you have it does not mean other people cannot use it, and they will use it, and eventually we are back to square one again. So what are your advice that when all these AI tools and then other people are not using ChatGPT or these AI tools? So what are your advice to those people who are using it and those who are not using it?
Yeah. So regardless of whether you're using it, I mean, this is going to sound so like old school. But here's what I'd say. First of all, everybody's not using it. There's a lot of people that are using it internally for their own organization, but they're not leveraging it in that capability. And I know that because I've talked to multiple revenue leaders on that. However, what I would say is there's a couple things. Go old school, right? Pick up the damn phone and actually call someone. You know how many times I get calls from people? It's very, very, very rare, right? So one, you could stick out by doing that and actually calling someone versus just relying on email. The other thing that you could do is there's platforms out there that are very economical now where you could send direct mail, you could send customized gifts, you could do things like that that are very, very simple to execute against that they kind of have you stick out from the noise. That's another one. Third one, and I'm a huge proponent of this, is basically, and this kind of happened to me on accident where I started interviewing my prospects on a podcast. And then what happened is they started asking me, oh, Ryan, what do you do exactly? How do you help? And then basically you could turn a podcast into like a pipeline, right? Where you interview only the top people that you would like to work with that fit your ideal customer profile, your perfect customer profile. And then you could essentially convert them into customers by building a relationship, providing value in advance, and then asking thought-provoking questions to them that make them reconsider, oh, maybe I do need help with this service, or maybe I need help with standing up a website or improving it, and that's what kind of naturally happens as a byproduct.
When you are talking to the B2B sales and you work with mostly SaaS, selling SaaS, mostly software services, and we are selling services, what do you see the difference? Like when we are selling sales as a service, right? I mean, service as a service we are selling to the customer. Do you have any advice for us that, you should do this?
For services versus SaaS is what you're saying?
Yes.
So the real critical thing, because like my entire career, or not my entire career, but a lot of my career was selling services. So I was selling managed services. So totally get it. I think like the number one thing you have to do is establish in the customer's mind, the first point in which you talk to them or communicate with them, what's the tangible outcome that they're going to get, and quantify it, right? So I think most people don't do that. They do very, very softly. So for example, if someone was asking me to spend $5,000 or $10,000 on my website, and my website's something I'm working on right now anyway. So, but I know you mentioned that is where a lot of people that you have in your community are, right? So somebody was helping me with my website, and they were like, hey, it'll cost you $5,000 to do this, right? That would be, I'd be like, oh, $5,000 for a website sounds expensive, right? However, if that same person came to me and said, hey, it's $5,000 for a website. However, for my last 5 clients that I've implemented this at, they've actually had an increase of $100,000 in sales as a result of the changes we made because of XYZ, and here's a testimonial to prove it, then it becomes a whole different story. It becomes an investment, not an expense, right? And so that's where people, I think, could probably do a better job, because it's everybody, because of what's happened with Amazon and the B2C consumer market of instant gratification, whether it's Netflix, whether it's Amazon, people want results and they want it fast. And if you don't have results, they're going to get pissed. And so that's something that I would just kind of want to call out, if that makes sense.
Definitely. My last question to you would be recession, even though it's not officially here, but we see a lot of the market is not stable enough. And especially for service industry, a lot of people are losing contract right now. What I have seen that a lot of people stop doing sales. They're like, why should I reach out to them? People are annoyed. But my suggestion to a lot of them is that you still have to do your job. It's almost like going to gym. You have to continuously go. So what is your suggestion about this, recession and what is going on right now around you, and what do you see, and what is your suggestion to agency owner whether they should reach out to their customer or not?
Yeah, are you talking existing customers or net new?
New customer mostly.
Yeah, I think, well, and the one thing I forgot about pipeline, and this is relevant to your question right now, is to ask your best customers for referrals. Really, really do that and focus and narrow on that. So what I would say is people, I mean, it's not like we've gone through an apocalypse and there's no more businesses anymore. There's still companies spending money. They're just looking at everything tighter. Right. However, there are still thriving industries. So you could look at different verticals or sub niches that are really, really growing now, that are growing fast, because there are those that are doing it. Like, even though venture capital is dried up a lot, let's say versus 21, there's still companies that are getting a lot of venture capital in like the earlier stage round, let's say seed or series A, where series B, C, and D might be getting a lot less funding. Right. Mm-hmm. So also like cybersecurity, AI companies, like those companies really, really, they need to move fast, right? Mm-hmm. So there's different areas where companies or sub niches or verticals are still growing really, really fast. You just got to take a step back, re-identify those, and then go after them hardcore and put all your might towards them. So that'll kind of offset it. The other thing I would say too is this, like, and if you kind of look at it, maybe, your close rates, and I looked at this, close rates dropped, I think 30% last year as a whole for B2B companies. And so all you have to do is look at, okay, either what are the levers I could pull? I could pull the quantity lever, or I could pull the quality lever of what I just mentioned. And the quality lever is something that I would pull versus just the more button, because that's when you get into spam bill and you're sending tons of emails and you're not getting the results you want. So.
No, thank you, Ryan. What is the best way to reach out to you, and what other consulting services do you provide to anybody who's listening in?
Yeah, so there's two core elements, like I said, on how I help companies, and I'm looking at expanding that. But right now, it's either on the pipeline creation, like companies that have a pipeline problem. I have a solution where I help companies ramp up referral-led growth through their existing customers if they have a base, or through podcasts as a pipeline. I also have like a sales conversion revenue sprint that I do with folks as well. So that's what I do. Where you can find me is my website is ryanstaley.io. I have lots of content on there. My podcast is called The Scale Up Show. And if you heard me here, feel free to send me an email. It's ryan@whalesellingsystem.com, and just mention that you heard me on the show. And, let me know if you have any questions or if there's anything I can help you with.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Talk to you soon.
All right. Excellent. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. To catch all the latest from us, you can follow us on Twitter @ManagedCoder, or visit our website at ManagedCoder.com. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.